Hi, I'm Jessa. I have a YouTube channel and a PhD. Now, my PhD doesn't make me smart or particularly qualified to make this video, but it does make it so that my friends ask me a lot about whether or not something on the internet is BS. And I just spent the last 24 hours fact-checking, digging up primary literature, and researching the history and the truth behind the Plandemic video that's circulating the internet right now. And I get it. It can be really overwhelming to figure out what to believe. And it's pretty important because clicks, shares, likes, and your email address are a commodity. They're tiny little votes. And we're preyed upon by groups that are really, really good at making pseudoscience sound like real science. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I think about when I'm trying to decide if something on the internet is BS. So if you find yourself thinking, I don't know, maybe there's something there, but it could be BS, then this video is for you. So let's jump in with one of the overall strategies that I think about. So can I believe it versus must I believe it? This is a strategy that I learned about from Jonathan Haidt in The Righteous Mind, where he pointed out that when we come across something that we want to believe, then we think, can I believe it? Can I believe? I can believe that, right? And if there's something that we don't want to believe, then we think, must I believe it? Is it so compelling that, that I must believe it? So what I try to do is just stick with the must I believe it. When I'm going to share something on the internet, I want it to be so compelling that I must believe it. All right, here's number one, choosing the right experts. Now, an expert isn't an authority that's infallible and can never be wrong, but experts do kind of fill the role of when we don't have time to read and analyze data. We don't have 24 hours to put into something. The best thing that we can do is to take advice from people that are really qualified to be dispensing the advice that we're seeking. And for me, I have a PhD in molecular genetics from Johns Hopkins University School of Medicine. But I'm not qualified to speak on what should we do about COVID-19 because I'm not an expert in that. My husband is a doctor. He's a neurologist. And like all neurologists, he knows about as much about immunology, virology, epidemiology as anyone else, right? So if CNN were to ask him to sit on a panel to offer medical opinion on the coronavirus crisis, he would say no because he's not the right expert. It's just not his field. And what I notice is that my friends that tend to be good real scientists, they are often unwilling to answer questions about things like coronavirus that, I might ask, some of my science friends. I left science to solder iPhones years ago. I don't know what's going on anymore. And I'll ask some of my science friends that are in some of the nation's top tier research universities and institutes, hey, what do we think about this? And they'll say, I'm not an epidemiologist. That's not my field. And yet on the other side of that, we see this really, I think, really dangerous, the worst thing that we're doing, which is we're putting our trust into these unqualified internet experts. And that's a really big mistake because non-experts masquerading as experts can get us into a lot of trouble when we're trying to figure out what to believe. So I want you to think about this. Not an expert in the not an expert category would be your neighbor that's a nurse. It's not an expert in epidemiology and the viral transmission of diseases. It's just not their field, and neither is any professional YouTuber, any blogger. Dr. Oz, not an epidemiologist. Dr. Sanjay Gupta, who is a neurosurgeon, not the person that can be speaking to the field of virology, immunology, biostatistics, modeling, population. It's a completely different building at the School of Medicine. It's just the wrong experts. Dr. Phil, not a doctor, not an expert. Donald Trump, not an expert. 2 emergency room doctors from Bakersfield, California, that are really, 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 really bad at statistics. Not experts. And here's one, a former virologist that hasn't worked in a lab in 10 years, who is best known for having published a now retracted paper based on accidental lab contamination of patient samples with mouse virus. Not a good expert. All right, so then who are our real experts? These are going to be the people, if you look around There's going to be moms and dads that are trapped at home just like you, that are trying to learn how to homeschool and make Pinterest bread, but they have dedicated their lives to the study of the rich history of past pandemics. They understand infectious disease, viral transmission. They are epidemiologists, they are immunologists, and they are actively working and understanding the huge body of literature that can inform the decisions that we're making today. Now, what are those guys doing on Zoom calls? They're doing what scientists do. They're debating with each other. They're considering alternate hypotheses. They're arguing, and they are working up a consensus. What is the best thing for us to do? And I would care very much about those experts and what their opinion are, as opposed to some dude on the internet that happens to have an MD that's willing to say, I'm no epidemiologist, but I'll tell you whether or not you can wear a mask. Right? So choose the right experts. All right, number 2, beware of gut instinct. So our minds can become sort of primed to believe something, and it's really, really difficult to sway us away from that using reasoning and logic. In fact, in Jonathan Haidt's book, The Righteous Mind, he showed that if you take people and you ask them to make a judgment on a scenario, like, you run over your dog, is it okay to eat it? Most people are going to say no. But if you ask them to give a reason, then they might say, because the dog could have diseases. Then if you challenge that reason, that dog didn't have any diseases. Now is it okay? Then they're still going to say no. The same thing happens every single time. What he found is that people are compelled to continually invent increasingly ludicrous reasons to prop up their gut intuition. I just know it's wrong. And if you knock all of them down, in the end, they still won't say, I guess it's okay. They'll say, I don't have a reason. I just know it's wrong. And that's really scary, right? Because it teaches us that what we think of as reason and logic, what we're really doing is we are using reason and logic to justify what we just sort of know to be true, that gut instinct. And that can get us in a lot of trouble, especially now, right? Because right now we all want the same thing. We want for COVID-19 to be not that big of a deal. We want it to be okay to go out and enjoy summer. We want to get the kids out of the house. We want to open our businesses. We want to make money and feel economically safe and put food on the table. We want it to be just a bad flu. So we are going to be primed. Our gut is going to be primed to favor arguments that tell us it's okay. We want to keep that gut feeling. So the only thing that I can sort of keep in mind when I'm looking to see is something going to meet that must I believe it metric is that I really have to try to scoop out the gut feeling and try as best I can to evaluate things independent of what I really want it to be. So that's strategy number 2. Number 3, confirm facts independently. When pseudoscience masquerades as real science, they're hoping that you're just going to accept their version of the facts. And that's really tough. I know that it's hard because we don't often have the time to go do a lot of fact checking. But you can always go to Snopes.com and actually do that, and a lot of this stuff will be debunked there. There are some great places that just do fact-checking if you look hard enough on the internet. And for this particular pseudoscience, the Plandemic video, I've looked around. There's some really, really great resources that have like just done all the fact-checking for you. So look for that. When you find yourself spending time and really kind of digging into something that you're not sure if it's BS or not, and you're checking facts, make sure that you're looking for the primary source. So real scientists publish real work in peer-reviewed science journals. They don't publish them to blogs on the internet. Real science writers that are digesting and making it easy to read, real science writers always link to the real articles. And you should click those links and look back to those real articles. If you want to know more about something that is from real scientists, then you can go to PubMed.com. PubMed.com, search around for a review article. A review article will sum up a bunch of articles that are about a topic, and those are written by scientists for scientists. Primary literature itself is how scientists talk to each other and tell each other about their findings. And one of the first things that happens when anything is groundbreaking is other groups will try to confirm the findings. So, like anyone, scientists can make mistakes or interpret something incorrectly. And when they do, you'll see other articles that either confirm or fail to confirm a finding. And if a finding fails to be confirmed, then real scientists respond by accepting that that was wrong, and then they look for a new solution. Pseudoscientists will double down when they're wrong. They will invoke conspiracy. They will invent increasingly ludicrous logic to prop up their gut intuition rather than change their hypothesis. And you can see that when we see examples of pseudoscience coming our way. Here's an example of a 2009 finding about mouse viral DNA in some patients with chronic fatigue syndrome. After millions of dollars were spent by many labs for 2 years to confirm these results, they were not able to be confirmed. Instead, some of the researchers realized that there was a better explanation of the data, that the original paper had actually detected a common laboratory contaminant, mouse DNA. And that's how real science works. Number 4, try on more than one explanation. When you see something and it might be BS, think about, well, what's another way to explain that? What's sort of the alternative? And there's always going to be a different hypothesis. So always open your mind to more than one possible explanation. And then you can use Occam's razor or the principle of parsimony to try to figure out which one fits or explains what you're seeing best. Usually it's the simplest explanation. So we're going to try that out now as we apply Occam's razor to talk about Plandemic. All right, so here it is. We're going to talk about Plandemic, and we're going to use Occam's razor to see whether or not the premises that are presented in Plandemic really fit our metric, must I believe it? Now, this started out yesterday when 2 of my friends asked me to give an opinion about the potential validity of a particularly artful work of pseudoscience, Plandemic. Most of us don't have time to dedicate to fact-checking every, what about this that's shared by a friend. And I want you to think about that. A share is an endorsement. It's a tiny vote, and we need to be judicious about it. Because, well, maybe there's something there. That can actually be really, really dangerous. For a lot of the pseudoscience, it stems from the anti-vaxxers, and the end game there is almost always to build momentum for a pretty dangerous idea. And that's why vaccinations are bad. Don't get vaccinated. We don't need vaccines. But vaccinations, they just don't fit a good, bad, black or white model. They are really, really good, but they are not perfect. People absolutely get adverse reactions to vaccines all the time, but they save millions of lives. And if we don't get one for COVID-19, then a whole bunch of people are going to needlessly die. But of course, I'm not an immunologist, so I'm not the right one to speak on vaccines. When you share that anti-vax pseudoscience, even if you're just saying, maybe they have a point, I don't really know, can anybody tell if this is BS, then you're casting a vote. And you need to be mindful of that. You're getting eyes and notoriety, you're spreading the word, and that's exactly what the point of creating these kinds of time-wasting pseudoscience nonsense is. And what happens to the world when we pass around content from these dubious experts that are telling us something else, another bad idea? They're telling us that their gut feeling is that it's okay to go back to normal, even though they have no formal training in epidemiology and they aren't statisticians, and they're just sort of saying, seems like it should be okay. Then I think that's equally dangerous. In fact, as I was sitting here writing the script for this video, I got a phone call, and it was from my sister, and she was telling me that my Aunt Nancy has just died of COVID-19. And she lived in one of those assisted living facilities. And one of the residents, it turns out, was picked up and taken out of there to go on a fun vacation with their family. And when that resident was returned to the facility, that resident had COVID-19. And that case of COVID-19 is what brought it into the facility, and then it spread from that floor to the next floor, and Aunt Nancy caught COVID-19 inside the place that she lives. It was brought into there, and she just died alone. And why are we talking about this? I think that we have to realize that it's really important what we choose to like, share, promote, pass around. It has meaning, and it has consequences. So you got to be careful. You got to use your brain. All right. Now about Plandemic. Authors masterfully designed a platform. I love the platform to harvest your email address and invoke conspiracy with this really clever whack-a-mole approach. I mean, this is pretty cool. So what they did is they made a site and they put up a link. Here's the video. Here's the content, and you can download it and you can post it anywhere you want yourself. So that is going to inspire any kind of minor YouTuber or anybody else that wants to partake of the free clicks by reposting the video on YouTube or social media. Now, YouTube itself, generally, in my experience, only cares about ads, but it will step in and delete a video if it gets enough user complaints. So YouTube doesn't usually just delete, a propaganda-y type video. They don't like to watch people get chopped up, but they generally don't just delete something that's an idea, unless they get a bunch of complaints, and then they will. And so once the seeded initial videos began to be deleted, which was either by design, hey, let's take them down now, one at a time, or through viewer complaints, or through, tongue-in-cheek copyright complaints, like, through YouTube, where the original author, that's my content, take it down. You can do that as well, and YouTube will delete your video. Or it could be, the other explanation, perfectly fine as well, that YouTube said, no, we're not having this on our platform. That then looks like exactly what they're going for. These videos are being taken down by the man. And the whack-a-moling began. So that, bravo, Plandemic people. That's a really masterful way to incite and invoke the sort of conspiracy. All right. So the video presents an explanation for COVID-19, and let's walk through the two sides of Occam's razor. And we're going to spin multiple hypotheses. We're going to do two, and we're going to see which one you think fits the data best. All right. Number one. Now, this is my, I kind of wrote down what happens in the video, adding in a lot of the details that I found from doing some digging, fact checking for the last 24 hours. All right. Which explanation fits best? Number one. It's a plandemic. The well-paid director of the NIAID, who graduated top of his class and developed a healthy academic research career across decades, is a total fraud that has deceived millions and has had a hand in purposefully unleashing a virus on the whole world, killing thousands of people across the globe so that he can patent and profit off of its eventual cure. And by the way, 30% of all vaccines have mouse DNA in them, which might be bad for you. Also, COVID-19 was bad in Italy because they have a lot of dogs. Also, the oceans are full of healing microbes, and you can teach Ebola virus tricks like how to infect human cells. Now, we know all this from the evidence of a single researcher Judy Mikovits, who was notably a bartender for 5 years after she left her trainee position at an NIH lab. Now, some rich people hired her to find a cure for their daughter's chronic fatigue syndrome, and she started a lab. Now, because she was good at finding viral DNA, she looked for viral DNA, because wouldn't that be great? Wouldn't it be great if chronic fatigue syndrome was caused by something as black and white as a evil, dirty villain virus? Just a virus causes it, instead of a complex, multifactorial interplay between genetics, psychology, the environment. And hey, guess what? She found a virus. She found one. She found some mouse virus in the blood cells of CFS patients after she treated the cells with a chemical. But she didn't find the virus in the cells from the normal people, except that they didn't get the chemical treatment, but that's probably not important. Now, her dumb colleagues couldn't replicate the findings. Many labs tried for 2 years and spent millions of taxpayer money trying to replicate the findings, and you won't believe what they concluded. They concluded that it was her shoddy lab work that had contaminated the patient samples with mouse virus. But that's fake news. Those samples were not contaminated. She really did find mouse virus in the CFS patients, and it was there because those poor people must have gotten it from tainted vaccinations. The vaccinations were contaminated with mouse virus because, she explains, it really is a common lab contaminant, and it probably contaminates like 30% of the vaccines that we give people, except not in her lab. No, I mean, just to be clear, there was no contamination in her lab. That was legit mouse DNA in the human samples, right? Just to be clear. Now, there's only one reason why the other labs couldn't find mouse DNA in the exact same patients. They were paid off by the American taxpayer dollars. Maybe a Bitcoin account at the NIH? I don't know. Maybe they do this all the time. She was disgraced as a scientist, and her paper was retracted by the high-profile journal Science. Now, whose fault is this? Tony Fauci. Tony Fauci, because while he was running his own lab and directing the NIAID, he was secretly masterminding the suppression of the work of her tiny Reno, Nevada lab. Why? Why her? Because years ago, she had once given him attitude when she picked up the phone when she was just a lowly technician, and he had asked for a copy of her boss's manuscript for a paper completely unrelated to HIV, since her boss was a cancer researcher. She had said no. And now he was making her pay for that rudeness with her career. She was fired from the private lab that she worked at because of a totally unrelated insubordination event, aka the boss was a total B. And as one does, she took her hard drive out of the work computer when she left, stranding them with no copy of the research that they paid for. However, when she was picked up by the police on a warrant to deal with the data theft, that was Tony Fauci's fault because his goons must have planted the hard drive to silence her. Being jailed by the deep state was not about the stolen hard drive, you know. It was to silence her from letting the world know all your vaccinations are laced with mouse DNA. Because even though it's not actually proven to do anything bad, everyone knows that mouse DNA is basically the same as mouse poop, and that would be the end of the vaccination industry because mouse poop is disgusting. Then there was a 5-year gag order that prevented her from speaking about the research that she'd already publicly published before it was retracted by the journal. She was threatened that if she did speak about the mouse stuff, that more evidence would be found about the petty civil offense of stealing the hard drive, and she might end up back in jail for another couple hours. Undeterred, she has been active in anti-vax groups and events for several years, but is definitely not an anti-vaxxer. Why would you even think that? Through no fault of her own, she has become unemployable as a medical scientist. However, Despite the financial benefit and personal validation and notoriety from becoming a viral sensation in the conspiracy and anti-vax cycles, she doesn't care about money. She cares about letting the world know that COVID-19 is one of those, oh, you have a scary problem, I happen to have the exact solution right here, things. COVID-19 was patented, planned, and will be paid for in dollars extracted from U.S. citizens by the modern American nerd mafia at the NIH, Uncle Tony Fauci, the Godfather. All right, that's one explanation. All right, so let's flip our mind and spin the other hypothesis. Maybe that's all BS. And maybe there's another explanation. Maybe there's a virus that came from bats, just like we've seen before with SARS and many other times across evolutionary history. And this virus is new and it kills people. How many people? You know, it's hard to count. How about this? Let's just ignore all of the counts of cases and deaths, and maybe that's the flu, and maybe that's and statistics. Forget about all that. Just zip that up, and let's use only one very simple metric. Number of refrigerated body trucks. All right, so let's compare the number of body trucks needed at hospitals and nursing homes year over year, right? In the years prior to 2019 and 2020, the answer was 0 body trucks. And now the answer is more than 0 body trucks. I mean, this virus is very contagious, as evidenced by body trucks parked outside of hospitals and things like the South Korea church super spreader event, the choir in Washington where everybody got sick from somebody that didn't even have any symptoms, and pretty much every nursing home there is. Aunt Nancy's nursing home, right? Dr. Fauci, it turns out, is actually a well-intentioned scientist that is pretty good at calming us down by giving us the facts. His opinion is squarely in the center of all the other epidemiologists and scientists that have dedicated their lives to understanding how pandemics work historically and what to do about them. Even though none of us have lived through a pandemic, the world has. And we have people that understand them, and we should listen to the advice of these people. This virus is special because, unlike the flu, it has a potential to overwhelm us, as evidenced by the body trucks parked in New Jersey. We trust science even though we know it's sometimes imperfect. And if we do nothing, we trust that 2.5 million of us will statistically be dead needlessly. And that's a lot of body trucks. And we know how to prevent viral transmission. We know you got to wash your hands, don't touch your face, disinfect things, and most importantly, you got to stay away from sick people and people who may be sick but don't know it, which is pretty much everybody. We know that we all must just assume that we are infected and don't know it, and we got to keep our breath clouds to ourselves. We got to wear masks. And we also know that humans are smart and that scientists will race to find a treatment or a vaccine because there's a lot of money to be made. They're going to do it. We know that it is far better to get this virus later rather than sooner, later, when treatments are available, when we don't have to take random pills from other diseases, while staring at a doctor who's wearing a jerry-rigged face shield that looks like it was some kid's art project. We're really good at finding solutions to problems when we're incented to do so, and that's what's going to happen, because ingenuity is really what makes America great. Now, I want you to ignore my opinion. Weigh the evidence yourself and just make your own decision about whether or not Plandemic is BS. And remember, smashing the like button is always voting for an idea. So make your votes count.